Hello, everybody. We are back for episode 25 of the Shiny Developer Series. That's a very nice number, and I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate that than to bring back a guest who was on near the very beginning of this adventure. And boy, has he been active in a lot of Shiny development and a lot of great advancements in the broader community. It is my pleasure to bring back to the Dev Series Colin Fay. Colin, how are you doing today?
Great. And you? How are you?
I'm as geeked as could be. This has been looking forward to this for a long time, and I still will mention to all of our listeners out there that when you look at what we have on the Dev Series, some of the most popular content is from your episode earlier and the Golem screencast. That is still
Oh,
right up
nice.
there in the view count. So, congrats to you.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And so it's been, we were actually chatting in the pre show. It's been almost 3 years, I think, since
Yeah.
you were last on. And boy, a lot has happened for you, professionally, especially, such as my favorite new recently published book, Engineering Production Shiny, which ironically is one of my most liked tweets when I did this kind of goofy pose for it. But why don't you tell us, Colin, since we were last chatting on this, what was that process like to get engineering production shiny all the way to publication?
Yeah, it basically it's been a long journey because I think it took something like 2 years, maybe 2 years and a half, from getting in contact with the publisher and having it published. Um, I think it took a lot of time because what I wanted for this book is to have something which is new. So I didn't want to publish like a summary of everything that exists, but I really wanted to think about the process of writing Shiny apps and thinking about the tools you'll need. And it took a lot of time because I did a lot of research. I read a lot. I wrote some tools as I was writing the book. So um, yeah, I wanted this book to have like original content, something that you won't find anywhere else. Um, on the same time, I wanted it to be like a book about building Shiny app, but a book which is more about engineering production software. So basically, you have, of course, a lot of things about Shiny, but you have a lot of things about engineering web application or organizing your work or um, I don't know, a lot of stuffs about how to think about an application, how to develop it. And in a sense, you could uh, easily, quote unquote, uh, change it with another technology. So if you want to change and call it, I don't know, if in 5 years we have a new technology instead of Shiny, it could still apply. Or
Absolutely.
maybe if you're interested in software engineering or web app, in the broad sense, you'll still find stuff in this because some of the content, of course, it's focused on R and Shiny, but it's still broad enough that you'll find ideas, even if you are, I don't know, building JavaScript applications, or simply maybe if you are simply quote unquote building like Markdown document or dashboards in Markdown, you'll still find some elements that will apply to your use case. I'm thinking about, um, for example, the focus on user experience, on like accessibility, on how to organize your work, how to, yeah, all the things you have to think about when you are building a web application that is sent to production and web application or even web content. So these things that applies to, yeah, production applications.
Yeah, there's so many aspects of this that this book, especially for those that are kind of new to this idea of going from prototype to production, puts so many principles in place that you may not hear about in the general like our community or just general data science that inevitably you will encounter at some point. A lot of these things I learned the hard way, but I'm excited that we're going to be giving this resource out to those that are new to this journey, or even the quote unquote gray beards like me that still need brushing up on a few things here and there. There were, we'll kind of get into what your favorite parts are, but certainly I want to tell you my favorite parts. One of them is honestly around the design philosophy as you're beginning to scope these things out. The idea of being intentional about getting that business logic sorted out before you even get to the glitzy UI pieces so that you get all that ironed out. And in fact, you had a great recommendation to take advantage of writing, say, our markdown vignettes as
Yeah.
you're prototyping these back-end solutions. These are all things that now when I read it after the fact, they're like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But sometimes you need that little nudge or that reminder this book is telling you to reinforce those concepts. So certainly I'm a big fan of that idea for sure.
Yeah, and even the concept of accessibility, so making your application uh, accessible to a larger audience. So people, for example, who have trouble seeing, or
Right.
things like color blindness, which is something you learn, like it's web development 101. You'll go on Free Code Camp, which is like a path for learning web development. And it's just like in the beginning, you're learning accessibility, but it's something that is not talked about a lot in the R community. You know, you're building your web application and you're building your Shiny app, you're putting it on the web, or even your Markdown document. You don't think about accessibility
Mm-hmm.
or things like that. So I think it was something important to talk about because, yeah, the idea of putting something in production is like making it available to a lot of people. So people who might not have as many, possibility as you. Maybe they
Right.
can't, things like people have trouble navigating with a mouse, so they do everything on the keyboard. And this is
Yes.
something you have to think about because if you have to move your mouse from everywhere in your application, or you can't navigate in it with your tab or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
it can get it can be hard for them to use your application. And
Sure.
even more in a field where we are, I don't know, we are building dashboard with COVID information, and it's something you give to the broad public. But some people might not be able to read it or to use your Shiny application because it's not accessible. So this is something I wanted to talk about. So I don't talk enough about it in the book. I wish I had more space and time to develop this, but this is something which seemed important to me and that you won't find anywhere else, at least in any book that I know of.
Yeah, that's great points. I mean, honestly, there's so much additional content to go into this. Maybe that's a second edition, hint, hint. But certainly I've been doing this slightly more in the context of even just with the customers for apps I'm building as I speak. Technically, we got a request that the plots we were making, we had stuck with the standard palettes in ggplot2, but we had very correct feedback that no, not necessarily. We better, accommodate, visual color blindness or other endeavors. So now I have a toggle to put those front and center, and then they can switch back and forth between them. But these are things that when you have that mindset from the beginning, it actually makes development easier down the road. You don't have to retrofit it in. But if you think
Yeah.
of that mindset from the start, whether it's accessibility, or to be perfectly honest, even just organizing your code base in a logical way, it just saves a lot of rework later on.
Yeah, and I think what's important to keep in mind, yeah, you're speaking about mindset, but what's important to keep in mind when building a Shiny app is that you are doing this for someone else,
True.
and this someone else is going to end up on your UI. And if your UI doesn't work, your application doesn't work. You can have like very innovative, like backend and beautiful algorithm and stuff like that. But if people
Right.
can't use, if they can't click on the button, or if they can't read the ggplot2 because you didn't use the correct palette, so your application doesn't work. You can have something very innovative in the backend, but yeah, as soon as your UI fails, in a sense, if your UI fails, your application doesn't work.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. I've been down that road many times the hard way. But and the other thing that I think really is touched on, even if may not say specifically, but the principles in the design and the orchestration of everything. I think gets you a greater starting point for working on these apps in a team environment. Because I cannot tell you how many times I was consulted on somebody, either at the day job or even elsewhere, saying they made this cool prototype, but then when they work with a team, it's very difficult for them to contribute back. Well, guess what? They had the app as one big file. Of course, it's going to be difficult to contribute when it's just one big app.r or an interactive R markdown document. It's like 3,000 lines of code. So, I mean, I have you kind of know this from following some of the stuff I do. I have been probably one of the biggest cheerleaders of Golem because I think having an app as a package brings you these principles up front
Yeah.
that hopefully can be relatable, and I think are relatable for anybody that has at least intermediate experience with R itself. So Golem is one of the bigger focuses of the book. And I'm kind of curious, ever since Golem has rolled out, along with obviously the rollout of engineering production Shiny, what have you observed in terms of the uptake of Golem and kind of the broader R community? And what's your take on maybe the future of it?
Yeah, so I'm very happy about the way people are adopting this. And, I think you coined the phrase, once you go golem, you can go back. And
There are certain people that
I-
watch me probably later on. I'm going to clip that, but yes, that's right.
and yeah, I think it's been like the general feedback from people. So I'm very happy that people are enjoying this. And yeah, it seems that it's been something needed in the community of Shiny developers for a while. And I'm happy with we put a framework and we put this into practice with Column. I'm I kind of like the idea that it it gives a more serious touch to the Shiny apps because it has had the reputation of it's not for production, it's not reliable, stuff like that. But if we with Golem we help like legitimating Shiny application for production and for big application, and I think it helps also people getting more into engineering application. So because you can do a quick Shiny app, quick and dirty Shiny app, and it works.
Right.
But if you want to, as you said, if you want to take this app and put it in production or build a larger app on top of this, if you don't have the software engineering mindset from the beginning, it's going to be hard to work on this application on the long run. So I'm kind of happy that we help people working with this and getting more acquainted with building packages because some people may have never built built a
Right.
package before, and
Right.
they are starting with Golem and they learn how to build a package along the way. So I'm kind of happy that we help people getting more into engineering their application and in an engineering mindset more. And I know that it seems a little bit more complex in the beginning because if you are starting with Golem compared to starting with basic Shiny app template, it seems like a lot. There are a lot of things, but down the road, you're gonna, if you start with the simple skeleton and you need to go to production, you're gonna pay it back at some point. But if you
Right.
start with Golem, it's harder in the beginning, but it gets easier along the road once you get the concept and once you understand everything. You can get like very efficient in the way you work and in the way you work yourself and with your team. And one of the first function in Golem was the add module function, and
Yes.
I'm very proud of this function because basically before that, what you did is I was going to the Shiny website, just copying and pasting
Oh,
the skeleton, removing
I've
the
lived
stuff.
that life many times in the past. Yes.
And basically, it's like a recipe for disaster because copying and pasting, you're just going to forget stuff,
Right.
and
Right.
just being sure that you have a correct name and stuff. It's kind of hard because, yeah, you'll have trouble along the way doing that. So I'm kind of happy that we are doing that, helping people to be more efficient because you don't lose like 15 minutes doing that, or it's robust enough that if you add a module, it's going to have a correct skeleton and it
Right.
works. You don't have to rethink this thing. And so I'm happy that we help people doing that. I'm happy that people are coming and opening issues and saying, I don't understand that. And
Hmm.
we explain them that they need this is a package, so this is how it works. And I think people are getting into developing package while using Golem, so which is nice. And I think with its like 100,000 download on the CRAN on the RStudio mirrors a couple of weeks ago. So
Excellent.
I'm kind of happy about that. And so I'm happy that people are getting more serious about the development, and the fact that people are using it and they believe in this framework. It means that people are getting more serious about Shiny application. So it doesn't look like something for prototypes anymore. So
Right.
it can be built larger up, and it's robust, and you can put it on GitHub and use a CI to do the test and do everything like any other web framework. So I'm very happy that it helps, doing a more, giving a better image of Shiny application. And of course, helping people do more software engineering. And I think we help also people getting more into JavaScript or CSS or things like that, because it's a little bit easier to integrate external things into Golem. So if you want to start integrating JavaScript or CSS into your app, it makes it a little bit easier. And of course, the book talks about it a little bit. So
Right.
I'm happy that people are getting more into this.
Yeah, it opens those possibilities. And honestly, before Golem and in my earlier days of Shiny, it always seemed like such a huge lift for me to start the CSS customization or start the JavaScript customization. But with the helper functions inside, you can quickly get up and running, much like you did with the aforementioned module function. You can quickly bootstrap an initial JavaScript function, an initial CSS file in the right place, and make sure that it's injected into your app's interface in the correct place, which again is something I screwed up royally in my beginnings of this. So any help that a package like Golem can give me to make that transition, even if I am not a great web designer by any means. I'm not as upfront with styling as I would like, but I'm on that learning journey. But this is just another way to minimize that barrier of entry to actually implementing the stuff when you get to it. So it's a great helper there. And to be honest, I think one thing that is not talked about enough in kind of this more higher level Shiny production development is that it's never usually just Shiny. Like you said, there are lots of extensions we have to do with styling, with JavaScript, frankly, even with other systems to connect to. And so that's something I've always been intrigued by, just kind of watching your GitHub repos develop now and again. And I see these repos experimenting with things like databases. I think I even saw something about Kubernetes. Like you're definitely pushing the envelope a lot of this. But what's your take on interfacing Shiny with these different systems? Like what's motivated that for you? And what are some of the areas that you think people maybe should be paying attention to as they start to up their skill set in this area?
Yeah, how it started is basically that so I've got a lot of friends who are developers but are not developers, and if you talk to them, they write code in like 5 languages on a daily basis. And on the other end, if you go to the our community, people are a little bit more reluctant about learning JavaScript or CSS or HTML, which is basically if you are Shiny developers, you are web developers, so it makes sense to learn the tech stack, for the web. And so if you for example for JavaScript, if you don't learn how to build just a little bit of JavaScript, just for example, integrating an external libraries. If you think about something like notifications, there are tons of JavaScript libraries that can do notifications. So it can enhance your application. But if you don't take the leap into JavaScript, you don't learn how to build, how to integrate these libraries to your app, you just are going to be stuck with what other R developers have wrapped inside an R package. So for example, I think notifications is a good example. So we've got the basic Shiny notification. You've got Shiny Alert, which is like a very cool package for alerts. But
Yes.
if you see a Shiny Alert, it's a Shiny Alert. But you have a lot of other ways to integrate notifications. So basically, my idea is if you want to go a little bit further, if you want to do something that doesn't look like a Shiny application, something that looks like a website, it's way better to learn how to integrate these other libraries. For example, I've been working on a project that integrates translations. And if you are relying on stuff in R, you are going to for example, you are going to do weird stuff like case when language equal French, then render UI or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But translation is something that can be done only in the browser. You don't need R to do that. Your browser can do that, because if you have this, you have a lot of JavaScript libraries that can do that. And if you know how to integrate this JavaScript libraries and make it work with your Shiny app, you're not like tied to our code or to a package someone else has written. And yeah, it feels like if you are building these web apps, you have a lot of possibilities, even for, I don't know, CSS. For example, there are a lot of CSS templates on the web, free CSS templates. And if you want to build a dashboard, or if you want to build a web page, a website, or anything, if you don't know how to read HTML and how to integrate these templates, or HTML templates or CSS into your Shiny app, you're just stuck with the default Shiny looks, or the
Right.
the packages that someone else has written.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's always a fun project to do, writing like a wrapper for an 8-bit CSS for
Nessie,
Shiny.
I
But
loved it. Yes, I remember very well. Yep.
so it's kind of fun to do. But so I was discussing this on Twitter, I think today and yesterday. But it will take like a massive amount of work, for example, so it takes a long time to integrate a notification JavaScript libraries into R, because you have to think about all the use cases, how to pass all the options, how to do all that.
Mm-hmm.
When like it's a couple of lines of JavaScript just to integrate the library. So you link to the JS file, you have a couple of Shiny custom handlers. It's just like a couple of lines of code, and you're not tied with you're not stuck with what someone else has written.
True.
And yeah, I think you have a book, JavaScript for R, and yeah, it shows a lot like
Another
how to write.
valuable tool in the arsenal of Shiny development.
Yeah, write your own widgets and
Yep.
integrate your own JavaScript into Shiny. It's like if you know how to do that, you are going to make way better Shiny apps on the long run, because it won't look like any other Shiny app. You're not like stuck with what exists in R today, what Shiny
Right.
widget exists. And at some point, a Shiny widget is a wrapper around a JavaScript libraries. So people writing this Shiny widgets makes decision, and they make decision, and at some point it might be problematic, because you have to hack your way into doing something, because it's not it's not a standard use case. So basically, something you can do yourself in JavaScript. It really enhances the way you can build Shiny applications. So that's why I've been experimenting a lot with Shiny JavaScript integration. And the way I build Shiny application today is I start with an HTML file and with a CSS file and some JavaScript libraries, and then I put Shiny element into that.
Interesting. Okay, so yeah, you're flipping the script a little bit. You're starting with the more lower level tech behind it, and then you're putting Shiny kind of on top of it. Yeah, that's something that I have not ventured into doing much yet, only because I'm pretty lucky in that between, say, the great work that David Grandjean's been doing with the R Interface project, I have a lot of great starting points already. But then again, there are going to be some esoteric requests I'll get probably down the road where it's got to look a certain way because I have to optimize it for maybe mobile and maybe a wider view or things
Yeah.
like that that are outside the typical requests. So I feel like that is one of, at least for me personally, one of the next steps is to be able to get more comfortable with interacting with this kind of tech from the beginning and then putting my customizations on it and then bolting the shiny pieces on it as I go forward. That it's not a natural thing for me yet, and probably isn't for many of our audience. But certainly we'll be watching kind of things you develop and others that are I consider the big thought leaders in this community of like what ideas you have to make that easier for people. So that's awesome.
Yeah, so there is a function in Golem called either use external HTML template or add HTML template. So you
Okay.
can if you find, for example, there is W3 CSS, which are free HTML templates.
Right.
So I have Golem example, which is a bit like that. Yeah, there are a lot of free HTML and CSS templates on the web, so it might be interesting to look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put a link to that in the notes as well.
Open.
So yeah, I think this is a great time, Colin, to start diving into maybe some examples of you using these principles in practice. I think you have some great queued up for us about leveraging HTML templates that you were just talking about. So let's dive into that a bit.
Yeah. So this is a little example of using an HTML template. So as I said before, you have a series of, for example, CSS templates here, which are free HTML templates. You can use it, so it's optimized for mobile and stuff. And basically, the idea is more to start with these HTML file and then put shiny elements into that. So basically you have this function from Shiny, which is called HTML templates, and you can link to an HTML file. So then you have a series of named elements, and basically if you go to so you have this HTML file, and you can put things into this with this way. So basically the idea is to start with this HTML file. So you use the external HTML file, you download it inside your Column application, then you leave some spots where you are going to inject shiny elements. So for example, if I go to first here, so first is my ggplot here, so it's a random ggplot. And basically what I do is my first here is one shiny module.
Ah.
So what I do is I inject the content of this module inside my HTML template.
This is interesting. Is it templating powered by, I want to say, a package called Whisker or Glue or something to that effect? How does that magic work?
I think it's in HTML tools.
HTML tool says it. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, wonderful.
So yeah, it interpolates everything like between the whiskers. So you have an element called first, and you say inside your UI. So you say this first element is the content of my module, and you do it like here and there. So you can do it like all the way inside your HTML.
Oh, this is fascinating. And you look at this, you would never know this is a Shiny app just by looking at this. This is fascinating.
Yeah, and there are like a lot of free templates you can use. I think there is something that looks like a dashboard, but so yeah, this is this HTML template. So there are like a series of free templates. So yeah, this one is an HTML page, and basically it can be reused as a Shiny application.
Yeah,
as an HTML template.
Yeah, I can see lots of use cases where maybe I'm building an app that isn't meant to be the most sophisticated in analytical processing, but it's serving some kind of key information in a setting that may be used more by leadership or others that are expecting a certain standard to that presentation, where now having the flexibility that, I mean, it's been in Shiny for a long time, but now Golem, you're giving like an easy way to bring those
Yeah.
templates in and then inject, like you said, those specific dynamic components with the whisker placeholders. Yeah, this is something I definitely want to practice later on.
Yeah, and as you can see, you have the standard like links to the CSS and JavaScript. So, and this is the kind of thing you received. For example, I have a client where they have templates for their Java applications, and
Mm-hmm.
basically they give me a series of HTML files and CSS and stuff like that. So I have, if you want to convert it to a Shiny app, you don't have to rewrite all this HTML code into Shiny. You can just use the HTML templates and inject things into the HTML file. And it's kind of, it gets easier to, it is easier to add a new CSS or add a new libraries because you add a new link here and you
Right.
can inject, for example, a new script. Or if you want to write uh, JavaScript straight in your web page, you can like write it just here. So yeah, it helps building application which look a little bit like less like a Shiny application. So yeah, as you said, if you look at this application, yeah. So of course you have the golem X sticker here, so you know it's a Shiny app, but
Right.
it could be built with any other web technology. It doesn't look like other Shiny app because this, I think this has been a little bit of an issue with the way we build Shiny apps, because I've seen a lot of Shiny dashboards. You know, we've all built a lot of Shiny dashboards, and
Guilty
the
as
issue is
charged. Yeah.
that I mean, a Shiny dashboard is a Shiny dashboard. You see a Shiny dashboard, you know it's a Shiny dashboard. You
True.
know,
Yeah.
and if you are delivering applications for a client and you build like 3 or 4 apps and they all look the same, it can be a little bit confusing for them. Just like, are you reusing the same code? Why is it like the same app every time? You know, you don't go on the internet and have like 2 websites that look exactly the same,
Right.
basically. Or, you know, yeah. So if you go, I don't know, on Facebook or on Twitter or on GitHub, it's like more or less the same features. So you have a, if you look, for example, GitHub on the home page is just like Twitter. You have something on the left, you have a timeline in the middle, and you have something on the right, and
Right.
you have
Right.
some buttons on top. But it's organized the same way, but it doesn't look the same. You know you're on GitHub when you open this page.
True.
So my idea with where I'm going with this is that using these external elements and focusing a little bit on the UI, it helps you building more non-standard Shiny apps. You know, you have something that looks different from all the other Shiny apps. So yeah, and I think if you go to the web development world, most people, they don't use like a template as is. They start for something and they build on top of it. So when they deliver a web app, it doesn't look like the app that they built like the week before. It looks like something different.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So, like I said, I'll definitely have some projects probably upcoming at the infamous day job where I can definitely leverage some of these ideas and hopefully make it such that if I start one of these efforts, I can also bring others along the ride, and we can build a distinctive look that maybe pertains to like the immediate group I sit in or our overall function. And that way, it's not the typical dashboard. They probably have dashboard fatigue from me because most of the stuff I do is say a Shiny Dashboard Plus or BS4 Dash, and nothing
Yeah.
against them, of course, but sometimes I'm gonna have to go a little bit more custom. There's one particular effort I have in mind for tracking predictions of stuff that doesn't have to be that typical dashboard layout. It can be some more intuitive and responsive and all that design stuff that I'm still learning the hard way.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the Shiny widgets I said before. If you
Right.
if you stay with what other people have coded, you are going to be prisoners, quote unquote, inside what other people have designed. But if you know how to integrate HTML templates, you know the possibilities there are endless. If you know how to read HTML and how to write a little bit of HTML, I mean, if you've learned R, you can learn HTML, I assure you.
That's
And
reassuring.
so if you know how to write a little bit of HTML or read it or just like understand how it works, yeah, the possibilities are endless. You can do way more stuff than just simple shiny dashboard or shiny dashboard plus or BS for dash, or if you want to do an 8-bit shiny application or
Right.
things like that.
Yeah, I can't remember if I told you the story, but way back at one of the earlier RStudio comps, back when the pre-pandemic world, I was invited by eWay to help TA the Advanced R Markdown workshop. And to make a long story short, I somehow got tasked with talking about the officer package for creating PowerPoints in R. But I put a shiny spin on it, where I gave an example app that was styled with your 8-bit Nessie CSS package. And that, when Eway saw that, he was watching the back of the room, and I pulled that up. That got his attention. So like those little things, if I can get Eway's attention on some shiny stuff I'm doing, that means I'm doing something right. But but it goes to show you that when you go a little bit distinctive, it's going to be a better user experience, one way, shape, or form, for whoever the customers are for that particular thing. Even if it's something as silly as a Mega Man PowerPoint generator in Shiny, say that 5 times fast. But it's fun to learn, though. It's fun to play with this too. I mean, it's fun when you get the hang of it. But I can see some in my audience, I'm sure, are gonna still feel a little hesitant to get into it. But I think what we're trying to tell here is that when you take the investment, especially some of the resources that have just become available, I think that onboarding is easier than it was maybe if you asked me like 4 or 5 years ago. So
yeah, and if you think about it, the question of accessibility, for example,
yes,
if you want to focus on accessibility, you are going to have to hack some of the packages that create the UI. But if you got your hand into HTML, you've got like more freedom to tweak stuff, and so yeah, it's gonna be easier to make a better, more accessible app.
Yeah, and I you and me both are cut from the same cloth. We like to kind of hack on different technology to start learning these things. And one effort that you started, I can't remember exactly when you started it, but it intrigued me immensely, and apparently intrigued someone else that's pretty prevalent in our community, Jacqueline Nolis, is your work on what you're calling the brochure package, which looks like it integrates some ideas that you've learned from the broader JavaScript world into Shiny. Why don't you tell our audience a bit about that endeavor?
Yeah, so it all started because I spent like a long time at work building an application in Node.js. And if you think about the way standard web applications are built, you don't have one UI, one server, and like throw everything there and hope for the best. What you're going to do is you are going to build like several endpoints, and you are going to build, I don't know, in Shiny. In Shiny, in standard Shiny, it's hard to integrate, for example, post requests. So if you want to post something on your server, it's not integrated by default. You can do it, but it's not obvious. You have to hack. You have to know a little bit about how Shiny works. And of course, it also bugged me that if you have a dashboard, it's all on the same URL. So you have one endpoint that is used for everything. Of course, you had a series of packages that implemented this, where you have a URL hash that changes, and you can render different part of your app based on that URL hash, but it's still not what you do, for example, with Node.js. What you do with Node.js, you are going to say, this is my slash, it's going to render this. This is my slash contact, it will render this. This is my slash XYZ, it will render this. So my approach was to think about how can we implement that in Shiny. So all the tools are there. They're a little bit hidden inside Shiny. So when I talked about this with Zhou Sheng, he said, you have everything built in. You just have to hack your way into understanding how it works.
Mhm.
So yeah, I dived into that, and I wanted to offer something that looks like how you would build a standard web app. For example, if you're building a standard web app with Node.js, you are going to have /home, you are going to /login, you are going to enter your username, your password. It's going to post on an endpoint on the app. It's going to generate a cookie that says it's cool, you are logged in. You are going to go back to home, and then based on that cookie, the Node.js app is going to render some stuff. It's going to do some queries on a database in the backend, and it's going to render elements. So my idea was, how can we take this way to build an app and do it with Shiny? And turns out that we can do it. It works. So it's a real multi-page Shiny application. What that means is that if you are on / or on /login, it's two different R sessions, two different Shiny sessions. So the thing is that with Shiny, if you spend a long time on the dashboard, I don't know, if you spend 20 minutes on the dashboard, it's going to stack some stuff in the memory, and
Sure.
if you do a series of queries or creating object, is going to do everything like in the same R session. But if you think about the way it's built with Node.js, you don't do that. You don't have one session where you stack everything and all your data frame and stuff, and
Right.
just you have like something in your browser that says this is you. So this is a cookie that says you logged in, and once you're logged in, it does query on, I don't know, MongoDB or a SQL database or something like that. So the idea was really to find a way to build this into Shiny, how to do real multi-pages Shiny application. So not something that is one Shiny session, but you hack the URL hash so it renders different elements. So this is really like you're defining several endpoints. You can define post request. You can define cookies. So this is something that misses natively in Shiny, because you can't you can't set a cookie on Shiny as far as I know.
Right.
And yeah, you can't tweak the headers in HTTP. So basically, the way it works is that when you are on a website, your browser does HTTP request to a server with a series of headers, which are informations, and the server returns a series of headers and the content. And this is not something that you usually do in Shiny, because you have just one initial HTTP request that connects to the server, and then the WebSocket exchanges elements. But on a standard web application, for example, if you try to reach something that doesn't exist, you're going to have an HTTP status which is 404, which is not something you can do on Shiny natively.
Right.
And basically, yeah, my idea was to try to integrate this way of building applications. So of course, it changes a lot from how you'd build a standard Shiny app, because yeah, the idea with a web app is you have a cookie inside your browser that says this is Colin, and what I have access to, and I query the database using this token. Am I logged in? Am I allowed to do that? So yeah, the idea was to take this philosophy and try to apply it to Shiny, and of course, to some extent. So yeah, this is something I would like to work on, but you can build, you can easier scale this application, because basically you have several endpoints. So you could say, if you have, I don't know, an Nginx proxy on top of that, you can say that / is routed to this R session, / home is routed to this, / login is into this R session. So basically you could have, like, if your Shiny app has five 5 endpoints. You can say these are the 5 R sessions, and you can just like move between those sessions, and it will work.
Very interesting. I mean, that's something that we take for granted when we build. I mean, I build one of my most sophisticated production apps at day job is technically obviously one Shiny app with a whole bunch of tabs on the side, all distinct modules, of course, because I, of all people, know to use modules for development. But the point is that it's all one overall R process, and they do very distinctive parts. A lot of this, like some is just for designing a Viz network diagram a bit. Another part is launching compute jobs to a high performance computing cluster. Another is assembling all that and then presenting that to the user. But that is admittedly a lot of overhead for one single process to do it all. So there's certainly a lot of gains you can have for compartmentalizing these different pieces. But yet, to you as a developer, can still treat this as one overall application, but the different subparts, like you said, could be individually browsed to, individually handled via whatever layers you want to put in front of it. Yeah, Nginx or anything like that. And that's really intriguing to me. But I do want to share with you a use case that you probably did not think about because that I'm trying brochure with. You saw maybe some tweets I had about this, but when I think about teaching the evolution of a Shiny app, i.e. you're going from that prototype stage, much like what you're showing with that template, you have the placeholders for the plot or the data table, you're just scoping things out a little bit. But then as you iterate on it, you're going to refine, you're going to maybe add more widgets, you're going to add more processing, and that is an interesting journey of itself. And then eventually you get to what you might call a production release. That production release could look quite different than the prototype, and it likely will. But in terms of telling people how that development process works, where I saw brochure could play a role is to have basically these mini apps in one overall app. It's not modules, but it's these separate apps that they might do something either very similar or radically different in terms of back-end processing, UI look. And what if you want to teach others how you got to those different steps and be able to point to those specific steps without having to point to just one app and then tell them to click this tab or whatever else? So my goal is to create basically a package on top of brochure to let the user say they're working on an app and they bootstrap this structure. They work on this initial version, this first page, if you will, and then they will say, okay, I want to now snapshot this, call this like my page one or whatever they want to call it. And then they launch another page that starts from that initial, that state of the first page ending. They iterate more, then they do another snapshot. They do like the third page, etc. And then you might have like 4 or 5 of these sub apps, each showing a different step in that journey, which could be directly linked on, say, a blog post or a GitHub repo. Or what really motivated this for me was Jesse Mostapek, who's a Shiny developer advocate at our studio now, was starting this tweet thread of the evolution of an app she was making for like visualization as a way to, another mechanism for teaching people about Shiny. And I thought, well, wait a minute. What if on top of those tweets, in those tweets, you could link to that specific app to show that particular step? So I think brochure is my key to doing that. And so I've done a few live streams kind of hacking away at this, but I feel like this has lots of possibilities than maybe even what you were envisioning earlier. But hopefully I'll just get your take on it. This is like my free consulting. It's my show, so I'm going to get free consulting. Do you like this idea? Do you think this is valuable? What do you think about it?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think that to some extent it could be bootstrapped by you create a series of modules, and then you take the module and it's going to create an endpoint of the app. So for example, you write the module and you have something to automatically turn this into endpoints, into pages.
Yeah. I've started just the initial process of getting the skeleton app up and running. That was my first step, which was directly inspired by what you all do in Golem when you bootstrap the app as a package, but like you alluded to earlier, the function for adding a module, I've been inspired by that, along with some other functions from Use This, to
Nice.
start with templates and then get them up and running, and then tell them to iterate on this. And then my next step is that like next step in the evolution of take the snapshot, make another mini app out of it. And that's where you might, depending on what I try to do with brochure, I might break things. So you don't be surprised if you hear me on the issue tracker about that. So be prepared.
Yeah, but that's to some extent that's what we've been doing. So I've built.
Uh-huh.
So we do training at ThinkR, and I've
Yes.
the Shiny. So there is an app you have to reproduce along the training. So it's like 10 days training, and you have to reproduce the app. And basically, it's on our Studio Connect, and you have slash exercise 1, and then you can move to exercise 2. And basically, these are some modules with parameters, and if you go on an endpoint, you have like this module rendered this way. So basically,
Mm-hmm.
it's more or less what you're talking about, because it's the same. You start with something simple and you
Right.
build on top of it. The more
Yes.
you learn about Shiny, and
Yes.
yeah, exercise 1 is like this page with this minimal app, and then exercise 2 is the same app but a little bit larger.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, this is exactly what we do with the application we have to do during our Shiny training.
Excellent. Oh yeah. So I didn't even think of that piece. Like on the job or in the training workshops to leverage something like this. That's brilliant. Yeah, maybe we'll see more people do that kind of workflow in the future. So it goes without saying, thank you for making brochure, because it gave me this possibility to try this pretty radical idea. But if I can get this at least usable by the majority of Shiny developers, especially those that are trying to train others, either in the general community or even in their org, like you were saying, that this could be a win. So this will be fun to
Great.
watch. Nonetheless, no matter how much I break, it'll be fascinating one way or another. So very cool, very cool. So I know you have a disclaimer on the repo saying like do not use yet. I assume it's been tough to find time to like iron
Yeah,
out some of the. Okay, yeah.
yeah. Because one thing I'd like to integrate is, so if you build an application with Express.js, which is a framework for building app in Node, you can do, for example, slash profile slash you have a regex for ID, and basically you can render slash Colin slash whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and this ID is available inside your session. So it can, so you don't have to think upfront for all the profiles. You can create any slash profile slash something, and it will be available inside the app. So this is like
Sure.
something that I've been thinking about a lot, about how to build that, but it's not that easy. So this is why like I'm still have this disclaimer, don't use in production, but I'm planning on working on that in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, well, one way I'm gonna obviously future-proof myself a little bit on this is that for every Shiny app I do, or even package I do, I mean, this is very related to Shiny, of course, is I use RM to manage the dependencies. That way I'm on a specific version of brochure right now. And then that way you can still iterate away, and I won't have to opt into that unless I explicitly say update
Nice.
brochure with this snapshot. So that's something I try to tell people at the day job and even elsewhere, is that package management within your Shiny apps is hugely important, because nobody's going to make a production app that just depends on Shiny itself. As much as that would
Yeah.
be the ideal, that just simply isn't going to happen. So being able to control that easily and be able to opt into whenever things are updated, I think that's critical to kind of the dev philosophy.
Yeah, and of course, saying that it's still like in development, it allows me to break things without annoying people, because if something is like, if I do a breaking change, I can say, yeah, it's still in development.
Right, exactly. Yep. Get that
So it
nice
gives me more
disclaimer.
freedom to break things.
Of course, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. One area that I think you've been exploring, and I have too, maybe in a different sense, is the idea of putting yourself up for success with development and even deployments potentially. And I think you've been looking at technology like containers to help with your development of Shiny apps. maybe you could tell us kind of where you see that trend going in terms of your work as developing these, but also even as you share these with your customers or elsewhere in terms of deployments.
Yeah, so what I really like about containers is that, yeah, if it works on my machine, it will work on the server. Um, because there is always this trade-off to do between how easy it is for the developers and how it's reliable on the long run. And it can be hard to grasp Docker or to build container or stuff like that. But once you understand how it works and it works on your machine, you're not like you don't have problem with I don't have the correct version of Linux. I don't have the system requirements. And
Right.
for example, I'm maintaining the RStudio Connect version, the RStudio Connect software for ThinKar,
Mm-hmm.
and basically it's really easy to deploy. You just click a button, but from the IT perspective, it can be hard because, for example, you don't have so right now I have to update the Linux version of a server because it's not compatible anymore with some library system for special packages, so you can't install some apps on Connect because you don't have the required Linux version, but uh, but if you have a container, if a container is compiled on your machine, you send it to your Docker Hub or your Docker repository on GitLab, for example. I think GitHub can do it also, but internally we have like our GitLab Docker repository. But if I compile it on the machine and I push it on the GitLab repo, it will work on the server. I just have to pull and run it, and basically it works. I don't have to think about, do I have a correct Linux version? Do I have the system requirements on the server? And it's hard. It's just like Golem. It's hard in the beginning, but once you get a good grasp on how it works, it will save you some pain, along the way. And so yeah, for deployment, it helps. And if you are if you talk with an IT team and you want to deploy an app and you just give them a container, they just have to do Docker pull and put it in the cloud service. They don't have to think about do I have a required GDAL version? Can I install SF on my machine? Oh no, I can't install Stringy because it doesn't work. The things like
Yep. Yep.
we've all been through that. You're a
I know.
Linux user, so you've been through
Oh yes, many
that.
times. Yes.
And basically, if you give them a container, yeah, they can just pull it and run it. So it really helps yourself because you know which package you need, which requirements you need, and you have this version that works. And yeah, you install the correct packages, the correct system requirements, and it works. You're not tied to yeah what Linux version you have, what stuff like that. You can really build your own stuff. It's just like JavaScript, HTML, and everything. You have more freedom once you master the tools because you're not tied to another environment or
Right.
some code that someone else has written. Because if something seems easy, it's very easy until it's not. It's kind of I don't know if you, for example, shinyapps.io, you just click a button and it works, and then you have to connect to a secure database inside a data lake for your clients. But how do you set your proxy? Or do you do this stuff? It's not possible because you don't have the freedom um, to change the environment, to change the way it works.
True.
But if you have a container, it would be easier, for example, to integrate with database or things like that. I tend to think that we should write Shiny application that if you have data, you should interact with the database um, because it makes more sense to have a SQL database. And if you have to do, if you have a large data set, it makes more sense to put it into a SQL database and
Right.
just let
Right.
SQL do what it's good for.
Yes,
If
absolutely.
if you have a large CSV and you just want to do some filter, just you can put it into a SQL database and do filter. Select where in SQL, and basically with Docker, you can use Docker Compose, which is like a way to say this is like a network of different technologies. So you have your Shiny container, you have your SQL container, you have, I don't know, your proxy or stuff, and you can just plug them all together. And if people put them on the server, it will work. You don't have to think about installing everything. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a matter of free you are to build and to not rely on someone else tech stack.
Yeah, the flexibility, the freedom piece of being able to choose, the tech stack for your development side, and as well as where your targets are for serving this up, I think is really intriguing to me. And I actually put this in practice. And again, you were one of the main reasons I was able to pull this off a few weeks ago, is for an online conference I was helping organize called Our Pharma. We thought of we want to do some fun stuff for the social breaks. And one of the things I thought about is, let's just have like a trivia thing about like crayon packages or whatever. So I found this package called PKG Stats that literally gives you a way to pull all the crayon metadata from a mirror of crayon. I literally made my own mirror crayon on the little server that's right next to me here. That was fun in itself, but I built like a very stylish Shiny app that did use a custom CSS template to make it look like we were in school with looking at a chalkboard and having the multiple choice questions on it. But I attempted to do this anyway. I'll get to why maybe it didn't work, but I attempted to track the answers users are putting in a MongoDB database that was hosted on a different platform. So the app was hosted on DigitalOcean's like one-click deployments thing that was based on the Docker container of the app. So in Golem, I of course used Golem to make it. I created the Docker file from your Golem add Docker file function, I believe, and trimmed that a little bit to meet my needs of some environment stuff. And then once I got that, put that on Docker Hub, made DigitalOcean map that out as the app, and then also put the database, which also had its own container, into the database service. And there you go. I just stitched everything together because Docker made that, or containers in general made that possible. So I think there's a lot of cool things you can do to mimic maybe that enterprise-like deployments or interactions that, like I said at the top, it's almost never just Shiny. You're interacting with something else. So I think getting to know this technology is, again, I'm going to say it's intimidating at first. But once you practice it a little bit, I mean, these are disposable things. If you break a container, just wipe it out, do it over again. It's not like you're going to lose a lot of resources along that ride. So certainly the tooling that Golem offered me just to get that up and running quickly, and the examples that you had about like interacting with databases from Shiny, that's on your repo somewhere. Out to find that and put in the show notes. That got me up and running with MongoDB just like that. So that was awesome.
Yeah, the cool thing with Docker container is that if you need a MongoDB, you just have to Docker pull MongoDB.
Exactly.
You've got a MongoDB running, which
yes.
I think this is really amazing. Like you want a SQL database, you just Docker pull, you have it running on your computer, on your server, which is like, amazing.
Yeah, and there's lots out there. I mean, there's almost all these tool chains out there, and Docker's not even the only container technology. But in the end, you get the flexibility and kind of the ways of customizing this to your liking. So certainly, like I said, we'll put links in the show notes to some of the examples you all drawn up with like interfacing Shiny with other systems, because I think that's a great way to learn, is to kind of build upon what you're doing in these examples. And even the contest submission you had a year ago, I believe, HexMake is another great example of interacting a stylish template with a database to do something that was honestly very practical. And I still use to this day to develop some hex sticker designs for internal packages. So nice. I love that app. Very cool. Well, Colin, as you see, we could talk forever about all these awesome concepts. We'll probably wrap this up pretty soon, but I guess I'll leave with something we've kind of discussed peripherally in the past. But as as you think about, the vision of what the messages you're trying to send in terms of, demystifying this idea that Shiny is just a prototyping tool. This is just as valid for production settings as anything else in the software development lifecycle. As as aspiring Shiny devs go on this journey, on top of what I'll just say, read engineering production Shiny apps. What other kind of advice do you give those maybe ask you about getting set up for this kind of mindset or this kind of set of techniques in general?
Mm. I think something that I've been doing a lot is just learning other technologies just to know how things are done somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because basically, for example, if you do Shiny, you know how to do Shiny apps, you know how to do great Shiny apps, but you inside a way of doing stuff. You're just doing things the Shiny way.
True.
And um, I can't remember where I read that, but it was a book about programming, and the author said I spend around 10 weeks every year learning a new language just to know how things are done there. And basically, if you are just learning, I don't know, learning JavaScript or learning Node.js, just building a small app or a small REST API, you're going to um, get a little bit of philosophy and it will help you think about how things are done there and how you can apply it. You can bring it to your main uh, your main development process. And basically, yeah, I think never stop exploring other things and maybe learn. If you used to do SQL, maybe learn to use MongoDB and think about how it works in MongoDB and if you used to do R, maybe try something else. Try learning Python, try learning Ruby, try learning something else just for the fun of learning something else. You'll learn a lot along the way. Or, for example, if you do a lot of ggplots and then try D3.js. So it's
Right.
another way to build and to think about visualization because so I tried a little bit of D3 and you have to really think about how to build your visualization because you
Absolutely.
are literally drawing squares on the browser. So
Right. Right.
when you try this, you start thinking about you have a different approach on how to build graphs because it's a different way of doing things. And if you explore different roads, it's going to be beneficial for your main topic. I think a lot of the stuff I'm bringing, just brochure, for example, it comes from building a web application with other languages and thinking about how it's done elsewhere and how can I bring this back um, to Shiny, for example. So
Yeah, the key, well, a lot of nuggets there, but I think the key point is that learning these other languages or these other ways of building similar things gives you a perspective that you might not necessarily get when you're just confined into that
yeah,
single track of building with Shiny exclusively or building a visualization with ggplot2 exclusively. Sometimes having that additional perspective not only helps you, like you said, learning something new, but you can bring those ideas to either further develop existing tech or to make something unique out of that development journey. So, yeah, I feel like that's kind of I've said in different places, but my next evolution in terms of where I'm trying to take my skill set is the integrations with other technology. I've done a lot with Shiny on its own, and I mean many things I didn't think possible I've done exclusively with Shiny. But I think now it's at the point where if I can bring in the additional customizations, the additional ideas that these JavaScript widgets are showing, and be able to put another spin, another unique development pipeline in these areas, I'm going to benefit from it, but also I think the products I make will benefit from it too. So it's
yeah,
not just me being selfish trying to learn all the things, as I say, it's really trying to make a better end product, whether it's on that day job or doing something silly for the shiny contest, like a hotshot racing dashboard for my Linux friends out there. So lots of cool ways to do all this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a sense, it's a little bit like running. You know, if you are
Yes.
running and you always run the same track, or if you are always doing the same pace or stuff like that, you are going just you know, you're never going to get better at running if you don't like train differently or try different exercises, different paths or stuff like that. So it helps exploring because you are going to get better. And yeah, and just for the fun of it, just for the fun of learning a new language, or just trying to compile your first Go code, just just coding an hello world in C or stuff like that. It helps, realizing how things are done in other languages. Because, for example, I tried a little bit of C. I read a book about C, and
Mm-hmm.
just it helped me understand better how C++ is integrated, how things work, and how R is constructed, the source code. And because I
Right.
tried a little bit, just compiled a series of hello world or things like that, and it helps along the way to learn to explore all the tracks.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it goes without saying, I've been looking forward to having you back on for a long time, and I'm so glad we were able to catch up again.
Yeah,
For
me too.
those, yeah, for those that want to keep up with what you're up to, where would you point people to follow your latest dev efforts in the R community and elsewhere?
Yeah, I think Twitter is the best place to go because
Yep.
I tweet a lot.
You do, yes. I try to be a little more active on there these days, but yeah, well, we're both trying to share awesome tricks and tips along that. And certainly, I'll just say check out Colin's GitHub repo because you got a lot of cool stuff on there. Probably stuff that flies under the radar compared to other things. So I'm definitely keeping watch of that and some of the cool stuff you're developing there as well.
Yeah, because apparently some people are using packages I wrote like a couple of years ago, and I don't remember I've written them. So
I know how that feels. Like I did some stuff at work that I forgot about, and they found it somewhere. Like, oh, geez, I don't even look at that. It's terrible or whatever. But I've learned a lot since I developed initial things. Well, certainly, Colin. Thank you again for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll. You're always welcome back anytime, and I'm sure I'll
Sure,
be
in
pestering
3
you a
years.
little bit. Yeah, maybe hopefully sooner than over 3 years. But I'm sure I'll be pestering you about the brochure
Sure.
application stuff I'm doing. But all in good open source fun, as they say.
Yeah,
All
sure.
right, all right.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me, Colin. And for those that want to catch Colin's previous appearance or the others in our back catalog, head to shinydevseries.com. We have all the episode posts on there with links to everything the resources that we've highlighted, which we'll have a post for this episode, of course. The YouTube channel is at youtube.com/Shiny Developer Series if you just want to go directly there. And yeah, if you want to follow my exploits on hacking away a brochure or other fun stuff, I'm on Twitch, twitch.tv/rpodcast, if you want to see my adventures there. But yeah, we're going to close up shop then. So we will be back, I'm sure, very soon with more great content on the Shiny Developer Series. So until then, see you later, everybody.
Bye.